Imagine an empire that united cultures, religions, and traditions, creating one of the richest and most powerful kingdoms in history. An empire that left eternal marks on India, from breathtaking monuments to a cultural heritage that endures to this day. But how did it all begin, and what led to its decline? The Mughal dynasty, also known as the Mughal Empire, ruled India from 1526 to 1857. Founded by Babur, a descendant of Genghis Khan and Timur, this dynasty marked a period of territorial expansion, modernization, and a unique fusion between Islamic and Hindu cultures. But behind the glory and splendor, there were intrigues, bloody battles, and a history full of twists and turns. Picture yourself walking through the magnificent halls of the Taj Mahal, feeling the cool marble beneath your feet, gazing up at intricate carvings that took master craftsmen decades to complete. This wonder of the world stands as just one testament to the artistic genius of the Mughals, but their legacy extends far beyond architecture to art, cuisine, literature, and governance systems that transformed the Indian subcontinent forever. What made this dynasty so extraordinary? How did a foreign Islamic power manage to conquer and then integrate itself so deeply into the fabric of Hindu-majority India? And perhaps most intriguingly, how did an empire that once controlled nearly a quarter of the world's wealth eventually crumble? The story of the Mughals is one of ambition and vision, of ruthless conquests and surprising tolerance, of unimaginable wealth and devastating wars. It's a tale that still shapes our world today, from the foods we eat to the buildings we admire. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires, like this video, subscribe to the Modern Age Chronicles channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we journey through time to discover the magnificent Mughal dynasty, an empire whose shadow still looms large over world history. It all began with Babur, a prince born in the lush Fergana Valley of present-day Uzbekistan. Imagine being just 11 years old and suddenly inheriting your father's kingdom. This was Babur's reality, a boy thrust into leadership, surrounded by enemies and treachery at every turn. Despite his royal blood, flowing with the legacy of both Genghis Khan and the fearsome Tamerlane, young Babur found himself pushed out of his ancestral lands, forced to wander with a small band of loyal followers. But what seemed like a tragic fall would ultimately lead to one of history's greatest empires. For years, Babur moved between Central Asian kingdoms, gaining and losing territories, learning painful lessons in warfare and politics. Each defeat taught him something valuable: how to inspire loyalty, how to exploit an enemy's weakness, and most importantly, how to adapt. When the doors to reclaiming his Central Asian homeland closed, Babur turned his gaze southward toward the riches of India. In 1526, after several exploratory raids, Babur made his decisive move. Leading an army of just 12,000 men, he faced the mighty Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi, whose forces outnumbered his by nearly 5-1. The odds seemed impossible, but at the historic Battle of Panipat, Babur revealed his genius. Though vastly outnumbered, Babur had two crucial advantages: cannons, relatively new to Indian warfare, and innovative battle tactics borrowed from the Ottomans. His men arranged hundreds of carts tied together with rope to form a defensive wall, behind which his matchlock gunners and cannoneers could fire in relative safety. The Sultan's massive elephant corps and cavalry, which had intimidated enemies for generations, found themselves trapped in killing zones, unable to maneuver effectively against Babur's disciplined forces. By nightfall, the battlefield was strewn with over 15,000 dead soldiers of the Delhi Sultanate, including Ibrahim Lodi himself. With this single, masterful victory, Babur transformed from a wandering prince to the founder of what would become the Mughal Empire. But Babur was far more than just a brilliant warrior. His memoirs, known as the Baburnama, reveal a man of remarkable sensitivity and intellect. Written in Chagatai, his native Turkish language, these memoirs show his love of poetry, his keen eye for natural beauty, and his thoughtful reflections on life and leadership. In one passage, he pauses from describing military campaigns to meticulously detail the flora and fauna of his new Indian territories, naming different varieties of mangoes and noting the strange new birds he encountered. He was also a generous leader who shared hardships with his men. Legend has it that during one difficult campaign, when water was scarce, Babur refused to drink until all his soldiers had been served, a gesture that cemented their loyalty during the difficult early years of conquest. Did Babur imagine his legacy would last for centuries? Perhaps not. In fact, he never truly felt at home in India, often longing for the cool mountains and flowing streams of his Central Asian homeland. The heat, the unfamiliar customs, the strange foods, all these he complained about in his writings. Yet despite his personal discomfort, he laid foundations strong enough to support an empire that would endure for over 300 years. Did you know? The Taj Mahal, perhaps the most famous monument of the Mughal era, wasn't built until 100 years after Babur's time. When you visit this wonder, you're walking on gleaming white marble that was transported from quarries in Rajasthan over 200 miles away. Thousands of elephants and countless oxen-drawn carts labored to bring this precious stone to Agra, and that's just the beginning of its marvels. Each surface of the Taj is decorated with intricate inlaid designs featuring gemstones gathered from across the known world, jade from China, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from Tibet, and coral from Arabia. Over 20,000 artisans worked for more than 20 years to complete this monument to love. But here's a fascinating twist in the story. Shah Jahan, the emperor who built the Taj Mahal for his beloved wife Mumtaz, had planned to construct a mirror image of it across the river, a black Taj Mahal made of black marble for his own tomb. Archaeological evidence suggests foundations for this second monument were actually begun. But before it could rise from the ground, Shah Jahan was overthrown by his own son, Aurangzeb, who considered the project too extravagant and contrary to Islamic principles. The emperor who created one of history's most perfect buildings spent his final years imprisoned in Agra fort, able only to gaze across the river at his greatest achievement, and perhaps to dream of what might have been. The true golden age of the Mughal Empire dawned with the reign of Akbar, aptly named the Great. Imagine ascending to the throne at just 13 years of age, inheriting an unstable empire with enemies at every border. Such was the beginning of Akbar's journey. A teenager suddenly responsible for millions of lives, with power-hungry nobles watching his every move, waiting for signs of weakness. But this young ruler would defy all expectations. When Akbar took power in 1556, the empire his grandfather Babur had established was still fragile, controlling only parts of northern India. By the time of his death nearly 50 years later, Akbar had transformed it into a unified, prosperous realm spanning most of the subcontinent. How did he achieve such a remarkable feat? The secret to Akbar's success wasn't just military prowess, though he certainly possessed that. By the age of 20, he had already led campaigns that recaptured Delhi and Agra from rebellious nobles. By 30, he had conquered Gujarat, bringing its wealthy ports under Mughal control. Eventually, his empire would stretch from Afghanistan in the northwest to Bengal in the east, and from Kashmir in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south. But conquering territory is one thing, holding it is quite another. Akbar understood something that many rulers throughout history never grasped. An empire built solely on fear cannot endure. Instead, he pursued a revolutionary policy of inclusion and tolerance that was centuries ahead of its time. Consider this. In an age when religious differences often led to bloodshed across Europe and Asia, Akbar invited scholars from all faiths, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jains, Zoroastrians, even atheists, to his court for open debates. These discussions weren't mere entertainment. They shaped his thinking and his policies. He abolished the jizya, a tax previously imposed on non-Muslims. He appointed Hindu Rajputs to the highest positions in his government and military. He even married a Hindu Rajput princess, who maintained her own religious practices within the royal palace. Perhaps most remarkably, Akbar eventually established a new spiritual path called Dini Ilahi, or divine faith, which incorporated elements from multiple religions. Though it never spread beyond his inner circle, it reflected his sincere belief that truth could be found in all spiritual traditions. One fascinating story illustrates Akbar's approach to religious harmony. When visiting the holy city of Varanasi, he noticed that Hindu pilgrims were being harassed while bathing in the sacred Ganges River. Rather than simply issuing an order for this to stop, Akbar had a platform built overlooking the river, where he would sit visibly watching. His mere presence ensured the pilgrims could worship in peace. This hands-on approach to governance became his hallmark. But Akbar's genius extended beyond religious policy. He was a master administrative innovator who completely restructured how the empire functioned. He divided his territories into provinces, each with its own governor, treasury, and judicial system, creating a remarkably efficient bureaucracy for the age. His tax reforms were equally revolutionary. Prior rulers had simply demanded whatever they thought they could extract from farmers, leading to corruption and abuse. Akbar implemented a systematic land survey, carefully recording the productivity of different soils and crops. Taxes were then set at about 1/3 of the produce, high by modern standards, but reasonable and predictable for the time. Farmers finally knew what they would owe and could plan accordingly. Agricultural production soared, filling both the imperial treasury and farmers' granaries. Akbar also standardized weights, measures, and currency throughout his realm, enabling trade to flourish across previously fragmented regions. He built an extensive network of roads connecting major cities, complete with rest houses for travelers placed a day's journey apart. The emperor's passion for learning and innovation seemed boundless. Despite being unable to read himself, a closely guarded secret during his lifetime, Akbar built an imperial library of over 24,000 volumes at a time when books were rare treasures. He would have scholars read to him for hours, absorbing information on subjects ranging from astronomy to poetry to military strategy. His fascination with art led to the establishment of imperial workshops where hundreds of craftsmen and artists created masterpieces that blended Persian, Indian, and European styles. The resulting Mughal miniature paintings remain some of the most exquisite artworks ever created. What truly set Akbar apart, though, was his genuine concern for justice. He frequently traveled incognito among common people to understand their lives and concerns firsthand. He established a bell of justice outside his palace that anyone, regardless of social status, could ring to appeal directly to the emperor. While this might seem like a mere symbolic gesture, historical accounts suggest Akbar often personally heard these cases. By the time of his death in 1605, Akbar had created not just a vast empire, but a functioning, diverse society with religious tolerance, economic prosperity, and cultural brilliance at its core. His legacy was an India more unified and peaceful than it had been for centuries, perhaps ever. And the institutions he established were so effective that even his less capable successors could maintain the empire's grandeur for generations to come. What made Akbar one of history's greatest rulers? Perhaps it was this rare combination of military skill, administrative genius, intellectual curiosity, and genuine compassion. Or perhaps it was something even more unusual in a ruler: the ability to grow and evolve throughout his long reign, to learn from mistakes, and to imagine a society different from, and better than, the one he inherited. While Akbar the Great laid the foundations for a prosperous empire, it was his grandson, Shah Jahan, who would transform the Mughal dynasty into a symbol of unparalleled luxury and artistic achievement. If you were to visit the Mughal court during Shah Jahan's reign in the 1600s, you would be overwhelmed by its opulence: jewel-encrusted thrones, cascading fountains, gardens that seemed to stretch to the horizon, and palaces adorned with gold and precious stones. Shah Jahan's very name, meaning King of the World, reflected his grand ambitions. And indeed, under his rule, the Mughal Empire reached its zenith of wealth and cultural refinement. Every aspect of court life was carefully choreographed to inspire awe. His legendary peacock throne, studded with thousands of precious gems, including the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond, was estimated to be worth twice the cost of the Taj Mahal itself. But behind this dazzling facade was a man with a passionate heart. Shah Jahan's love story with Mumtaz Mahal has become legendary. They met when he was just 15 years old, and she was 14. He, a royal prince, she, the daughter of a Persian nobleman. Though young Shah Jahan had other wives, as was customary for royalty, his devotion to Mumtaz was extraordinary. Court chroniclers wrote that she was not only beautiful, but highly intelligent, serving as his closest confidant and political advisor throughout their marriage. For 19 years, Mumtaz traveled everywhere with her husband, even accompanying him on military campaigns. She bore him 14 children, an astonishing number even for that era. But it was during the birth of their 14th child in 1631 that tragedy struck. While giving birth in a military camp in Burhanpur, Mumtaz suffered complications and, despite the efforts of the royal physicians, died in her husband's arms. Eyewitnesses reported that Shah Jahan was inconsolable. He emerged from her chambers a changed man. His beard had turned white overnight, and he spent days weeping, refusing food and company. The court went into mourning for 2 years, with music banned and colorful clothing prohibited. But even in his devastating grief, Shah Jahan was planning a monument that would change the world forever. Before she died, Mumtaz allegedly extracted 4 promises from her husband: to build her a magnificent tomb, to remarry, to be kind to their children, and to visit her grave on the anniversary of her death. Shah Jahan would keep at least one of these promises in a way that exceeded all imagination. For the next 22 years, more than 20,000 workers from across India and Central Asia, master architects, stonecutters, calligraphers, inlay specialists, and artists, labored to create what many consider the most beautiful building ever constructed, the Taj Mahal. Its perfect symmetry, its gleaming white marble that changes hue with the shifting daylight, and its delicate inlay work featuring 35 different types of precious and semi-precious stones, all combined to create something that seems almost supernatural in its beauty. But few visitors to the Taj Mahal realize the human cost behind its creation. The marble had to be transported over hundreds of miles on massive bullock carts. Thousands of elephants hauled materials to the construction site. Scaffolding made entirely of brick was built, as tall as the minarets themselves, because wooden scaffolds would have been inadequate for the massive structure. The financial cost was equally staggering. Modern estimates suggest the Taj Mahal would cost over $1 billion to build today. In the 1600s, it consumed a significant portion of the empire's treasury, approximately 32 million rupees, at a time when a skilled laborer might earn only 1 rupee per day. Such extravagance began to strain even the immense resources of the Mughal Empire. Shah Jahan's building projects weren't limited to the Taj Mahal. He also constructed the magnificent Jama Masjid in Delhi, renovated the Red Fort, and rebuilt much of Agra, with marble replacing sandstone. His love of architecture earned him the nickname the Builder King, but it came at a tremendous cost to the royal treasury. This financial strain, combined with Shah Jahan's increasingly lavish lifestyle and neglect of military matters, created political vulnerabilities. The emperor's preoccupation with architecture provided an opening for his ambitious third son, Aurangzeb. In 1658, when Shah Jahan fell ill, Aurangzeb seized the moment, defeating his brothers in a bloody succession war and imprisoning his own father in Agra fort. In one of history's most poignant ironies, Shah Jahan spent his final 8 years as a prisoner, able only to gaze out at the Taj Mahal across the river Yamuna, the magnificent tomb he had built for his beloved wife, which would ultimately become his own resting place as well. From his marble prison, using a small mirror, he would watch the changing light play across the dome of the Taj until his death in 1666. Today, the Taj Mahal stands not only as a masterpiece of architecture, but as a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the complicated legacy of imperial ambition. It attracts millions of visitors each year who come to marvel at its beauty and hear the story of the love that inspired it. Yet it also serves as a reminder of how even the mightiest empires can be undermined by extravagance and the personal desires of their rulers. So did you know that the Taj Mahal was inspired by a true love story? If you're enjoying this video on the magnificent Mughal dynasty, please like, share, and subscribe to the Modern Age Chronicles channel for more incredible historical narratives. And tell us in the comments, which historical monument impresses you the most? Is it the Taj Mahal, the Great Pyramids, or perhaps something else entirely? We'd love to hear your thoughts as we continue our journey through the fascinating history of the Mughal Empire. Even the mightiest of empires must eventually face its twilight, and the Mughal dynasty was no exception. The seeds of decline were ironically planted during what appeared to be the empire's greatest territorial expansion under Emperor Aurangzeb, Shah Jahan's son and successor. Aurangzeb seized power in 1658 through a brutal civil war that left his brothers dead and his father imprisoned. Unlike his predecessors, particularly his great-grandfather Akbar, Aurangzeb was a military-focused ruler of unyielding religious conviction. Standing over 6 feet tall with piercing eyes and a flowing beard, he cut an imposing figure. Ascetic in his personal habits, he slept on a simple mat, ate vegetarian meals, and sewed prayer caps to earn his own money rather than living solely off the imperial treasury. Under his nearly 50-year reign, the longest of any Mughal emperor, the empire reached its greatest geographical extent, stretching across almost the entire Indian subcontinent. A brilliant military strategist, Aurangzeb personally led campaigns deep into the south, conquering kingdoms that had resisted Mughal rule for generations, but what seemed like strength masked fundamental weaknesses. The constant military campaigns drained the imperial treasury that earlier emperors had so carefully filled. While Aurangzeb's armies conquered new territories, he lacked his predecessor's talent for integrating these lands into a cohesive empire. Most fatefully, Aurangzeb reversed many of Akbar's policies of religious tolerance. He reinstated the jizya tax on non-Muslims, destroyed numerous Hindu temples, and imposed stricter interpretations of Islamic law. These actions sparked widespread rebellions, particularly among the Marathas in central India, the Rajputs in the northwest, and the Sikhs in Punjab. One fascinating story illustrates how personal choices shaped imperial destiny. When the 9th Sikh Guru, Tegh Bahadur, refused to convert to Islam and protested the persecution of Hindus in Kashmir, Aurangzeb had him publicly executed in Delhi. Rather than suppressing Sikh resistance, this martyrdom galvanized the community. Tegh Bahadur's son, Guru Gobind Singh, transformed the Sikhs into a formidable military force that would plague Mughal rulers for generations to come. By the time Aurangzeb died in 1707, exhausted by endless campaigns at the age of 88, the Mughal Empire was larger on maps, but fundamentally weaker than when he inherited it. His successors would reap the whirlwind he had sown. What followed was a parade of ineffective rulers, 12 emperors in just the 50 years after Aurangzeb's death. None possessed the leadership qualities or vision of the earlier Mughals. Palace intrigues, assassinations, and power struggles became commonplace. Provincial governors increasingly operated as independent rulers, sending less and less revenue to the imperial treasury in Delhi. Meanwhile, a new player had entered the Indian political scene, the British East India Company. What began as a humble trading organization established in 1600 gradually transformed into a territorial power. The company exploited Mughal weakness, playing rival factions against each other while steadily expanding its control. The pivotal moment came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. When the Nawab of Bengal challenged British commercial privileges, company forces under Robert Clive defeated his much larger army through a combination of superior firepower and strategic betrayals they had arranged among the Nawab's officers. This victory gave the British control over Bengal, the richest province of the Mughal Empire, with its lucrative textile industry and fertile agricultural lands. With Bengal's wealth filling their coffers, the British expanded their territorial control through both military conquests and political agreements. By the early 1800s, the Mughal emperor had become a mere figurehead, confined to the Red Fort in Delhi with a pension from the East India Company. The humiliation was complete when the British resident or ambassador would receive the emperor seated on a chair while the once mighty king of the world stood before him. Yet the final chapter of the Mughal story was still to be written. In 1857, exactly 100 years after the Battle of Plassey, tensions that had been building for decades finally erupted. Indian soldiers employed by the East India Company, known as sepoys, rebelled against their British officers, initially over rumours that new rifle cartridges were greased with cow and pig fat, substances offensive to both Hindus and Muslims. What began as a military mutiny quickly spread across northern India, becoming a widespread rebellion. Rebels marched to Delhi and persuaded the aging Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, to become their nominal leader. Though 82 years old and a poet rather than a warrior, Bahadur Shah reluctantly agreed, becoming the symbolic head of the last major challenge to British rule. For a brief moment, it seemed the Mughal dynasty might rise again. But the rebellion, while fierce, lacked coordination. The British, though initially caught by surprise, rallied their forces and systematically crushed the uprising with brutal efficiency. The aftermath was devastating. When British forces recaptured Delhi, they executed Bahadur Shah's sons and grandson before his eyes. They then exiled the last Mughal emperor to Burma, where he died in 1862, a lonely, broken man far from the splendors of Delhi. His death marked the formal end of a dynasty that had ruled India for over 3 centuries. In a final symbolic act, the British Raj that replaced Mughal rule deliberately incorporated architectural elements from both Mughal and European traditions in their buildings, subtly suggesting they were the legitimate heirs to both civilizations. Yet the cultural legacy of the Mughals proved impossible to erase, living on in India's art, music, cuisine, and even in the very language spoken across much of North India. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Mughal decline is how it parallels the fall of so many great empires throughout history. The same factors appear repeatedly: imperial overreach, religious intolerance, succession crises, and the failure to adapt to changing circumstances. The Mughal story reminds us that even the most magnificent human achievements remain vulnerable to these fundamental challenges. While empires rise and fall, their cultural legacies often endure far beyond their political existence. This is profoundly true of the Mughal dynasty, whose influence remains woven into the fabric of South Asian life today, more than 150 years after the last emperor was exiled from Delhi. Walk through the streets of modern Delhi, Lahore, or Agra, and you'll encounter the Mughal legacy at every turn. not just in the grand monuments that dominate the skyline, but in the language people speak, the food they eat, the clothes they wear, and the art they create. It's a testament to how thoroughly the Mughals transformed the cultural landscape of the Indian subcontinent. The most visible aspect of this legacy is, of course, the breathtaking architecture. Beyond the iconic Taj Mahal, the Mughals left behind hundreds of spectacular buildings that blend Persian, Central Asian, and indigenous Indian styles into something uniquely their own. The Red Fort in Delhi, with its massive red sandstone walls stretching for over 1.5 miles, still serves as a symbol of Indian national identity, from whose ramparts the Prime Minister addresses the nation each Independence Day. Then there's the Pearl Mosque in Agra, whose pristine white marble courtyard seems to float above the world. The intricately designed Shalimar Gardens in Lahore, whose terraced waterways create a paradise on earth, and Humayun's tomb in Delhi, which established the distinctive Mughal tomb style decades before the Taj Mahal perfected it. But perhaps more remarkable than these individual buildings is how Mughal architectural elements have been absorbed into everyday structures across the region. The characteristic arched doorways, the decorative domes, the intricate jali screens that provide both privacy and cooling airflow. These features can be found in everything from government buildings to humble homes in villages across northern India and Pakistan. The Mughal influence on cuisine is equally profound and perhaps even more widespread. Every time you enjoy a plate of fragrant biryani, layers of rice cooked with spices and meat, you're tasting a dish perfected in the imperial Mughal kitchens. The royal chefs, brought from Persia and Central Asia, were given unlimited budgets to create dishes worthy of emperors. They introduced new cooking techniques, including the dum style of slow cooking food in sealed containers, which concentrates flavors in a way that was revolutionary at the time. Kebabs, those perfectly grilled morsels of marinated meat, were elevated to an art form under the Mughals. Legend has it that the famous Galuti kebab was created for an aging nobleman who had lost his teeth but not his appetite for meat. These minced meat patties were so tender they would melt in the mouth without requiring chewing. The tandoor oven, though predating the Mughals, was perfected during their reign, producing the tandoori chicken and naan bread that have now spread to restaurants worldwide. Even the concept of the complete meal, with carefully balanced flavors, textures, and nutritional elements, was developed by Mughal court physicians working with royal chefs. In the realm of clothing and textiles, the Mughal influence is equally pervasive. The sherwani, a long coat-like garment worn by men at formal occasions across South Asia, evolved from Mughal court dress. The salwar kameez, now considered a traditional outfit in parts of India and Pakistan, was popularized during the Mughal period. Even the elaborate embroidery techniques like zardozi, using gold and silver threads, reached their pinnacle under Mughal patronage. The very language spoken across much of northern India and Pakistan, Urdu, emerged from the Mughal courts as a blend of Persian, Arabic, and local dialects. Court poets developed a sophisticated literary tradition that produced some of the most beautiful poetry in the world. The ghazal, a form of lyric poetry expressing the pain of loss or separation and the beauty of love, became particularly popular and remains so today. Modern Bollywood songs often draw on this tradition, with their themes of romantic longing and poetic expressions of love. Mughal painting, with its meticulous detail, vibrant colors, and blend of Persian miniature techniques with Indian sensibilities, created a distinctive style that continues to influence artists. These paintings weren't just decorative. They recorded court life, documented historical events, and illustrated literary works with unprecedented realism and emotional depth. Even the concept of formal gardens, with their symmetrical layouts, water channels, and carefully selected plants, was transformed under Mughal rule. The charbagh, or four-part garden representing paradise, became a standard feature not just in imperial compounds, but in wealthy homes throughout the region. These gardens weren't merely decorative, they embodied philosophical and spiritual principles about humanity's relationship with nature. Music, too, bears the Mughal imprint. The classical Hindustani music tradition flourished under imperial patronage, with musicians receiving lavish support to develop their art. New instruments were introduced, new ragas composed, and new styles of performance developed. Emperor Akbar's legendary court musician Tansen is still revered as one of the greatest musical geniuses in South Asian history. It's said that when he sang the Raga Deepak, the candles would light themselves, and when he performed Raga Megh Malhar, the skies would cloud over with rain. Perhaps most significantly, the Mughals established a tradition of cultural synthesis, taking elements from different traditions and creating something new and vibrant. This approach, neither fully Persian nor purely Indian, but a creative blend of both, established a pattern of cultural exchange that continues to characterize the region. Today, over 20 million tourists visit Mughal monuments each year, marveling at their beauty and learning about the dynasty that created them. But far beyond these formal tourist experiences, everyday life in South Asia continues to be shaped by Mughal influences that many people don't even consciously recognize as such. When a family in Delhi enjoys a special biryani dinner, when a bride in Lahore wears intricately embroidered clothes for her wedding, when poets in Lucknow gather for a mushaira to share their latest verses, when architects in modern India incorporate traditional cooling systems into their contemporary designs, the Mughal legacy lives on. In this way, an empire that ruled for just over 3 centuries has left a cultural imprint that has already endured for more than 400 years and shows no sign of fading. The great Mughal emperors, Babur, Akbar, Shah Jahan, and the others, could not have known that long after their political power vanished, their cultural contributions would continue to enrich the lives of hundreds of millions of people. Perhaps that is the most meaningful legacy any civilization can hope to achieve. As our journey through the magnificent story of the Mughal dynasty comes to a close, let's reflect on what made this empire one of the most fascinating chapters in India's rich history. From the battlefield brilliance of Babur to the religious zeal of Aurangzeb, each emperor wrote his own distinctive chapter in this epic saga that spanned over 3 centuries. The Mughals weren't just conquerors. They were visionaries who transformed the cultural and physical landscape of the Indian subcontinent forever. Think about it. A small Central Asian army led by a dispossessed prince somehow created a dynasty that would rule one of the world's richest regions for hundreds of years. At its height under Akbar and Shah Jahan, the Mughal Empire controlled nearly 1/4 of the world's economic output, a truly staggering achievement. What lessons can we draw from their remarkable story? Perhaps the most compelling comes from comparing the reigns of Akbar and Aurangzeb, 2 emperors separated by just 2 generations, but with dramatically different approaches to governance. Akbar embraced diversity, abolished discriminatory taxes, appointed Hindus to high positions, and created innovative systems that allowed people of different faiths to coexist peacefully. Under his leadership, the empire flourished, not despite its diversity, but because of it. The creative energy unleashed by this cultural exchange produced some of history's greatest achievements in art, architecture, and governance. Aurangzeb, by contrast, pursued religious orthodoxy and attempted to impose uniformity across his vast domains. While he expanded the empire's borders to their greatest extent, he also sowed the seeds of rebellion that would ultimately contribute to its downfall. By the time of his death, after a nearly 50-year reign, the empire was larger on maps, but fundamentally weaker than when he inherited it. This contrast offers a timeless lesson. Empires built on inclusion and respect for diversity tend to foster creativity, loyalty, and stability. Those that demand uniformity often generate resistance that proves costly to suppress. We might also reflect on how the Mughals balanced tradition and innovation. They preserved elements of their Turkic and Persian heritage while embracing local Indian customs and ideas. This cultural synthesis, creating something new and distinctive rather than simply imposing foreign ways, helps explain why their influence has endured long after their political power faded. The story of the Mughals also reminds us how quickly fortunes can change. From the heights of Shah Jahan's gleaming marble palaces to the exile of the last emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, the decline took just 2 centuries. A blink of an eye in historical terms. Even the mightiest empires remain vulnerable to overreach, complacency, and failure to adapt to changing circumstances. Yet perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Mughal legacy is how it transcended the empire itself. Even as British colonizers dismantled Mughal political power, they couldn't help but be influenced by Mughal administrative systems, architectural styles, and cultural practices. The very language of governance in British India, with terms like Diwan for finance minister and Adalat for courts, came from the Mughal administration. Today, when you savor a plate of biryani, admire the elegant curves of an arch in a historic building, or hear the complex melodies of classical Hindustani music, you're experiencing living remnants of this extraordinary dynasty. The emperors themselves are long gone, but their cultural fingerprints remain everywhere across modern South Asia. The Taj Mahal stands as the perfect metaphor for the Mughal legacy. Built as a monument to love, it outlasted the empire that created it, continuing to inspire wonder in all who see it. In its perfect proportions and cultural synthesis, its blend of Persian, Islamic, and Indian elements, it embodies the best of what the Mughals achieved when they brought together diverse traditions to create something uniquely beautiful. So what will you take away from the story of the Mughals? Perhaps it's an appreciation for how cultural exchange can create spectacular new forms of art and expression. Maybe it's a reminder that tolerance and inclusion often lead to greater stability than rigid orthodoxy. Or possibly it's simply a deeper understanding of how profoundly the past continues to shape our present. How empires may fade, but their cultural legacies endure. If you've enjoyed this exploration of the magnificent Mughal dynasty, please take a moment to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate stories of grand historical drama. Subscribe to the Modern Age Chronicles channel for more content that brings the fascinating stories of the modern age to life. From the Renaissance in Europe to the Ming dynasty in China and everything in between. And let us know in the comments. Which aspect of the Mughal Empire fascinated you the most? Was it Akbar's religious tolerance, Shah Jahan's architectural achievements, or perhaps the cultural synthesis that created one of history's most remarkable civilizations? Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. Until our next historical adventure, remember that understanding the past doesn't just satisfy our curiosity. It helps us better comprehend our present and perhaps shape a wiser future.